In the world of board game media production, one man retains the integrity and tenacity to rise above the rest and compile the definitive list of the 100 best board games of all time. And that man, that legend, is Tom Vassell of the Dice Tower. And some guy named Chaz Marler's apparently made his own top 100 list. Because Tom asked him to.
No, I didn't.
Hey, Chaz Marler from Pair of Dice Paradise here, welcoming you back to another installment in my top 100 games of all time series. This episode, we're entering the top 30 with 30 through 21. And not only am I super excited, I completely ran out of ideas for witty introductions about 3 or 4 videos ago. So, let's just get right to the games. One thing that I am certainly beginning to see more and more of when it comes to the board game world are applications, or apps, if you want to be Dr. Fancy Time, appearing in board games. Games like XCOM and Alchemists and the upcoming First Martians and Mansions of Madness all have these apps that are, if not necessary, greatly enhance the gameplay experience. And sometimes a game comes around that does not have an application associated with it, but really feels like it should. And number 30 is one of those games that I really wish there was an app available along with it, and that is Spyfall. Spyfall is a fantastic, neat party game. It's one of those games that it's probably also just a social game people played before there was an actual boxed board game version of it. In Spyfall, as many players as possible all are in a secret location that everyone except one player knows about. That one player, without the knowledge of everyone's location, plays the part of the spy. And the spy has got to try and figure out where everyone is before everyone else figures out who is the spy. A simple premise, but one that is complicated by the fact that everyone is going to be bouncing around asking each other's questions about their location. The more filled with inside jokes and references that only someone who knows the actual location would be able to get, the better the gameplay experience has been, in my experience. So if everyone is just asking each other questions, why the need for an app? Well, because the game only has so many different locations. And what I would love to see is an app where all the players could log in from their smartphones or other smart devices and seed a list of locations beforehand. Everyone contributes 1 or 2 locations. And then the app randomly pulls one of those locations out of all the suggestions that were made. And that way, there's this ever-changing, evolving pool of seeded locations to choose from, but it's always going to vary, keeping the game fresh. But regardless of being sealed for freshness or not, Spyfall is still a fantastic, hilarious game that I absolutely adore, and that's why it breaks the top 30 at number 30. So it seems to me that at every convention there is always one hot game that everyone's talking about and everyone's playing and everyone's trying to get a copy of, which is fine, but far more interesting to me are the games that seem to come out of nowhere, that nobody is talking about before the convention, but then as the convention continues, you start to see more and more people playing this game and carrying it around with them. And for me, at Dice Tower Con this last year, that game was Holmes' Sherlock vs. Mycroft. This game reminds me of a cross between Targi and Lost Cities, and not just because it's only for 2 players. In this game, one player will be playing the part of Sherlock Holmes, and the other player will be playing the part of his lesser-known but still greatly appreciated brother, Mycroft Holmes. The 2 detectives are trying to solve something, and in doing so, they will travel throughout the city over the course of a week, talking to witnesses represented by cards that slowly are added to the board day by day. And each player has 3 meeples in their color, and on their turn, they will be moving those meeples to these other people that pop up in town to go question them. However, if both players move one of their meeples to the same card on a single turn, they'll spook that character, and that card will not be available in the next round. And the players are moving their meeples to these cards because each card has a special power that you can take advantage of on your turn to either collect more clue tokens, the game's currency, or obtain more clue cards, which will earn the players points at the end of the game. So you constantly have to be choosing which moves do I make to collect the most clues and clue cards while keeping as many options open for me on subsequent turns, while also preventing my opponent from having the most options available to them. This game not only demonstrates the crucial give and take that must take place in a two-player game, but also how literary figures can still have sibling rivalry. There's a reason why every time I turned around at Dice Tower Con last year, I saw another person carrying around a copy of this game. It's a fantastic two-player game that I highly recommend checking out, especially if you enjoy Targi, or Lost Cities, or a Sherlock Holmes story, or playing cards, or a little token. What can I say about game number 28 on my list? Nothing, so I'll move on. Okay, in hindsight, it's obvious that every game on the list must have something said about it. So every now and then a game comes along that may not be the most spectacular or revolutionary game in the world. It's not going to change the way you see board games or the way the industry operates, but kaplunk! It becomes a new classic game. And that game is Strike, which I talked about last episode. But another one is number 28 on my list, King of Tokyo. Now, admittedly, King of Tokyo is not one of those games that I sit around just yearning to play the same way that I would yearn to be done with this video series. No, but it does have a certain X factor, making it accessible to a very wide audience. In King of Tokyo, the board game, players will take on the role of a unique different monster who has 10 hit points at his disposal and is going to try and win the game by either earning 20 stars or reducing all the other monsters' hit points to 0, being the last monster standing. Players are going to accomplish this by rolling 6 dice on their turn, and the dice can result in several different things happening. First of all, you can gain victory points, you can heal up damage that you've taken, you can gain energy, which allows you to buy cards that give you new super powerers, or you can deal damage to your fellow monsters. King of Tokyo supports a large number of players and even a larger age range of players. Makes it a great game to always have available to bring out. It's a good gateway game, a great filler game, just an all-around great game. And that's why it is the king of spot number 28 on my list of the greatest games of all of the time. For those of you watching who have gone through life refusing to find out how Wits and Wagers works, let me teach you to learn. Wits and Wagers is a trivia game where the players do not necessarily need to know the answers to the trivia questions. However, you do need to know how to pronounce trivia. In Wits and Wagers, the answer to every trivia question is a number. And when players answer those questions, well, that's just the first part. Because the second part is all of the players' answers are going to be put out on the table. And then all the players are going to vote on whose answer, and not necessarily their own, they think is the closest to the correct answer without going over. Players may wager some or all of the points that they have accumulated to date, and they'll win more points based on how much the odds are against their answer being the correct one. At the end of the game, only one player, the one with the most points, will win the game, but usually all the players will walk away having learned something together. Which is why this fantastic design finds its place at number 27 on my list. You know, one of the reasons why it's been so difficult to make this top 100 list is, to be honest, I feel bad sometimes for the games that don't make it onto the list. There was this game that came out a couple years ago that was the absolute talk of the town, Forbidden Stars. But no, Forbidden Stars never clicked with me. And so the game sits in my box, next to my box. So if Forbidden Stars is such an excellent game, what could have possibly come along to push it off of my shelves and take its place? Well, that honor would go to game number 26 on my list, Star Wars Rebellion. Star Wars Rebellion is this huge hunk of plastic and cards that allows you to recreate the Star Wars experience on your own living room table instead of needing to go out and rent the nearest star cluster. In the game, one player or team of players is going to be playing the part of the Rebel Alliance, and one player or teams of players is going to be playing the part of the evil and nasty Empire. And what's really neat about this game is this is not just a pump out units and shoot them up, destroy the other guy's stuff game. Instead, among all of the planets laid out on the board, one of them is secretly going to be the Rebel base. Thank you, Chuck D. And the Empire is going to be trying to locate where this Rebel base is located. And if they find it and destroy it, that's all they got to do to win. Meanwhile, the Rebel players got a whole bunch of other stuff to worry about. This game is big, this game is full of eye candy, and this game is long. But I don't care, because I enjoy every parsec that I spend playing this game. That is number 26 on my list, Star Wars: The Rebellion. Alright, so we just talked about number 26 on my list, Star Wars Rebellion, which easily scratches that risk itch for me. In that respect, it's like the Lana Kane of board gaming. But sometimes you don't want to invest all that time and energy into the game, you just want kind of a more topical solution, you know, the Tenactin of board gaming. And that brings us to number 25 on my list, Cry Havoc. Alright, so I had an opportunity to play a demo game of Cry Havoc back when it was just in prototype form at BGGCon 2015. And the game was neat, and you could see some interesting concepts being developed. But then, at Gen Con just this last year, Cry Havoc was officially released. And after getting to play the final version of it, my mind, she was blown away. That, of course, is hyperbole because I am still a mostly functional human being, but the point remains that Cry Havoc literally blew my mind away. And here's why. Cry Havoc kind of reminds me of what would happen if you took Kemet and Blood Rage and squished them together in an unholy union and then supped from the juice that flows forth. I gotta stop making these videos when I'm hungry. As with those games, Cry Havoc rewards aggressive gameplay, but also each of the different factions that are available plays completely different from one another right from the get-go. So you really have a different challenge based on which unit type you play in the game. The combat system is completely unique, combining card play along with this very unique system where you have 3 different choices of what type of offensive tactical decisions you want to make during the battle. Do I want to just flat out destroy my opponent's units? Do I want to try capturing some of them? You have these different options you can do, but it's still kept very, very simple and fast. I enjoyed playing the prototype of Cry Havoc well enough, but the final version of the game just takes it to a whole nother level, and that level just happens to be at number 25 on my list of top games. Now, in Star Wars Rebellion, players are trying to control as much area as possible on an intergalactic planetary scale. In Cry Havoc, players are trying to control as much area on a planetary scale. And in number 24 on my list, players are trying to control as much area as possible on a city-wide scale. One city in particular, a city named Las Vegas. And that's why number 24 on my list was aptly named Lords of Vegas. In Lords of Vegas, players own and operate a myriad of different casinos along the Las Vegas Strip. Lords of Vegas is played in a cutthroat neato fashion where players are going to be taking over different spots along the strip, taking over each other's casinos, and even taking control of each other's money with the simple roll of a dice. I found Lords of Vegas to have this wonderful combination of strategy, tactics, and underhanded conniving. I will suggest one house rule that we played with. On a player's turn, they may visit an opponent's casino to try and win away some of that opponent's money. Now in the game, this is done with a simple roll of the dice and then consulting a chart. But the suggestion that we adopted was to instead replace that die roll with a quick game of craps. It matches the theme, doesn't take too long, and it adds to the intensity of that player action. But whether you play with this house rule or the original way, the point is that Lords of Vegas is still worth playing. And that is why it's number 24 on my top games list. Okay, we have talked about epic space battles that occurred a long time ago at a distance quite far from here. We've talked about giant battles that take place on this planet against 4 different factions vying for super crystals. We've talked about being mean to each other on a city scale level. That's a lot of in-your-face tension right there. And all of those games remind us that every now and then you need to just unplug, take a break from it all, and play a game the equivalent of just, throwing dice on a table. Therefore, I enter into consideration game number 23 on my list, Tumblin' Dice. What is Tumblin' Dice? Tumblin' Dice is a board that you put on your table, and this board has stair steps, and each stair step will gain the player a different amount of points. How does the player earn these points? By throwing dice at this board. Well, specifically, by tumbling their dice down the board's stair steps. Each dice that they throw, depending on where it lands, will garner that player a certain number of points times the number they rolled on the dice. So essentially, the players take turn tumbling their dice down this board, seeing where they land. I can't make it any more glamorous than that. Fortunately, I don't have to, because the beauty in Tumblin' Dice is in its simplicity. The simple fact that you are rolling these dice down this tumbling little board is what makes this game so great. I dig me Tumblin' Dice. Tumblin' Dice earns the distinction of being the game on my top 100 list that when it is played consecutively the most often. I think it is metaphysically impossible for the human entity to play just a single game of Tumblin' Dice in one sitting. And that's okay, because Tumblin' Dice is just as fun to play as it is addictive. There's only 22 games that I would rather play, given my druthers, and Tumblin' Dice isn't one of them, because it's number 23. As those of you who have watched the first episode in this series may recall, Risk, yes, the original, flavorless, basic, bare bones, nothing special, no preservatives added, Risk, was my 100th favorite board game of all time. And so, being a game that made such an indelible impression upon me in my youth, and in fact, being the game that kicked off this very series of videos, it should surprise no one that number 22 on my list is also Risk. One moment while I just adjust the bylaws about duplicates on the list, and we're good to go. Allow me to clarify. Number 22 on my list is Risk Legacy. And while this is a game that is built on the core Risk engine, the legacy aspect of this game reassembled the bits and pieces of my mind that had been blown apart by the previous game on my list. What's more, the fact that it's Risk really has nothing to do with this game's placement on my list. In actuality, this particular case has nothing to do with the game, but the people who play them. You see, in second grade, I met the person who would become my best friend in the entire world. And through the next 10 years of school, through all of those turbulent adolescent and teen years, he and I had our ups and downs, times that we drew closer and pulled farther apart, but through it all, we somehow managed to remain best friends. And then, as happens in life, we graduated high school, both got married, and moved about an hour and a half apart. And even though we're only separated by a distance of about 75 miles, as time goes by, it gets more and more difficult to get together as frequently as you used to. In fact, as time went by, we inevitably saw each other less and less frequently, until it got to the point where we went nearly a stretch of 10 years without really seeing each other. And that sucked. But about 4 years ago, I get this phone call out of the blue. And it's my best friend asking me if he would like to get together and play this new game he found based on a game we used to play when we were kids, Risk Legacy. So Risk Legacy is what finally gave our families the opportunity and the excuse to get back together and spend some time together. And it was like no time had passed at all. Except, of course, that we were older and now had hair growing out of places that hair shouldn't grow out of. And after that night of playing Risk Legacy, 2 weeks later, we got together and played it again. And a couple weeks later, played it again. And a couple weeks after that, and a couple weeks after that. And even after finishing the Risk Legacy campaign, we've continued being in touch and getting together on a frequent basis. And this reconnection with my best friend in the whole world probably would not have happened if it was not for this game right here. So, number 22 on my list. You are not only a game that is based on my favorite game from my childhood, but is also the game that reconnected me from my favorite person from my childhood. And that alone is enough of a reason why you have earned your space at number 22 on my list of my all-time favorite board games. Alright, so number 22 was such a story-driven entry. I do want to take a moment to talk about the legacy system and the impact that has had on my board gaming life. Fortunately, number 21 on my list provides that very opportunity in the form of Pandemic Legacy. Now, I can't really go into much detail about Pandemic Legacy without giving away spoilers about some of the secrets that the game has to reveal. So, I'll just say that Pandemic Legacy is like Pandemic with secrets to be revealed. So what is it that makes a board game a legacy game? Well, in both Risk and Pandemic Legacy, players are going to start out with a kind of bare bones regular version of the base game. But as you play it, things are going to happen. Surprises are going to be encountered. Secrets are going to be revealed, which is going to result in maybe adding or permanently removing some of the game's components, permanently altering the game board with stickers, writing on it with a Sharpie, and other things like that, and over time, changing the way the game itself plays by adding, removing, and editing the rules in the very rulebook. When I played Risk Legacy, I was left just hoping that more games would come along that used this mechanism. And when Pandemic Legacy became available, I was not disappointed. I am one in the camp of people that believes that there is a reason why Pandemic Legacy rocketed up to number 1 in the Board Game Geek list of top games of all time. And while it is not number 1 on my own list, it is just shy of the top 20, coming in at number 21. Yeah, of course. No, of course I was joking. Yes, I would never deface the official bylaws document. No. Right, exactly. Yes. Yes, exactly. Yes, I'll see you in court on Thursday. Okay. Take care. Bye-bye. Well, thank you for joining me for another episode in this Top 100 Countdown series. We are about to enter the top 20. Until then, I want to thank everyone who's been watching and commenting and just keeping things trucking along. Thank you so much, and in the meantime, until our next episode, be sure to subscribe to both the Dice Tower and the Pair of Dice Paradise YouTube channels. And also join us on Facebook and Twitter to continue the conversations about board games and whatever else comes up. Thanks. Until next time, I've been Chaz Marler, your host, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.
The Star Wars experience on your own living room table instead of needing to go out and rent the nearest star cluster. It saves so much space and time. Space time. Star Wars. The space and time because it's stars. It was a pun. And it was like no time had passed at all. Except we were uglier. Number 25 on my game list of the top 25 game trivia, to actually just play a quick game of chaps. Videos can be quite a challenge to make when one cannot speak. It's at number 24 on my list of worth games playing. Fortunately, I don't have to, because Dumblin... Where am I? Number 22 on my risk, still worth playing. And play it at number 40... I don't words. I don't. I can't words.